The Susquehanna River is ancient, older than the mountains that rise around it. 300 million years of flowing, carving, shaping. A river so old it watched the Appalachians grow, crumble, and rise again. Stretching more than 400 miles, the Susquehanna begins in the high country of New York, winds through the heart of Pennsylvania, and finally releases its long journey into the Chesapeake Bay near Maryland. It is one of the oldest river systems on Earth, and for thousands of years, it was the lifeline of the first people who called this valley home. Long before European maps traced its course, native nations thrived along these banks. The Susquehannock, the Lenape, and other Algonquian-speaking peoples built villages, traveled its waters, and lived in harmony with a land shaped by the river's ancient pulse. And so our story begins, with the river that shaped the land, and the people who shaped its history. Before Europeans even knew there was a North American continent, the region that eventually became Cecil and Harford counties was a borderland. Here northern, warlike tribes of the Iroquoian culture came into contact with the southern, agricultural tribes of the Algonquian culture. They met, fought, traded, and coexisted in this border area. Captain John Smith was the first European to explore this area in the early 17th century in his quest for a northwest passage to Asia for England's use, driven by the hope to prosper from the riches that would ensue from this trade. In 1608, Smith's party ascended the river about as far as the present-day village of Lapidum and the town of Port Deposit, and marked the site on his map with an X labeled Smith Fails. He could get no further up than 2 miles up the Susquehanna, on account of the rocks. His diary gives a fascinating account of the region and its native peoples as seen through European eyes. Susquehanna Indians, a tribe of the Iroquoian stock, situated in 1608 on the lower portion of the Susquehanna River and its effluents. The original form of the name used by Captain John Smith was Susquehannocks in his text and Susquehannock on his map. He first heard the name from Tokwok, Nanticoke, or Powhatan speakers of the Algonquian tongue, while exploring the waters of Upper Chesapeake Bay and its affluent, as the designation of a mighty people who dwelt on the Susquehanna 2 days' journey, higher than our barge could pass for rocks. Of this people Smith wrote, "Such great and well-proportioned men are seldom seen, for they seemed like giants to the English, yea, to their neighbours. Also that they were scarcely known to Powhatan, could muster nearly 600 able men, and lived in palisade towns to defend themselves from the Massawamecs, their mortal enemies. Meeting at the head of the bay 60 of their warriors, 5 of their chiefs did not hesitate to hoard his barge." Although in his text Smith does not mention the names of any Susquehanna towns, he nevertheless places on his map 6 towns with king's houses under the general rubric Susquehannock. The 6 are Susquehannock, Quadroque, Ataoc, Tezenai, Utchewig, and Sepawig. It is difficult to locate these towns correctly on a modern map. The foregoing names are evidently highly conventionalized forms of the original native terms. Unfortunately, Smith furnishes but little information regarding these people beyond a description of their bearing, size, and implements, and a general statement as to their habitat and their enemies, the most formidable of the latter being the famous Massawamecs. In 1666, Alsop wrote that the Christian inhabitants of Maryland esteemed the Susquehannocks as the most noble and heroic nation of Indians that dwell upon the confines of America. Other indigenous tribes shared this admiration through submissive and tributary acknowledgment, viewing the Susquehannocks as formidable warriors. Alsop noted that these people seldom sleep one summer in the quiet arms of a peaceful rest, but keep, by their present power, as well as by their former conquest, the several nations of Indians round about them, in a forcible obedience and subjection. He also described the Susquehannocks' unique customs. Men, women, and children roamed nearly naked in both summer and winter. Their faces bore red, green, white, and black stripes. Although their natural skin color was light, it had been transformed to a dark cinnamon hue through repeated dyeing with roots and barks. The hair on their heads was black, long, and coarse, while other body hair was meticulously removed. Some individuals even tattooed their bodies, breasts, and arms with intricate designs of beasts and other objects. Interestingly, no information concerning a clan system among the Susquehanna appeared in ethnological literature until the minutes of a treaty concluded at Spes on May 16, 1661, and a conference held at St. John's on June 29, 1666. These records revealed the names of the Susquehannock chiefs and delegates, as well as their respective clans. The Susquehanna delegates included a Dahadagisa of the great Terrapin family, a Sarangararo of the Wolf family, a Wascanequa of the Ohongeoquina nation, a Kagaregago of the Unquihiat nation, a Saracundat of the Kaikweriagaga nation, a Yuhanhiarellara of the Uskaquagga nation, a Wadden Hago of the Sconandihago nation. Notably, Androsonk's signature appeared without clan or nation identification. During this treaty, Maryland authorities agreed to dispatch 50 soldiers to aid the Susquehanna against the Seneca, referred to as Sinico, Nason, or Naijon. Consequently, Captain Odber was tasked with fortifying the Susquehanna fort. At the June 29, 1666, conference, war chiefs Wastahandda Harigara of the Turtle clan and Goswanquacraqua of the Fox clan sought assistance from the governor due to significant losses from the Seneca. They also pledged to deliver the King of Potomac, his 2 sons, to Major Goldsmith. On July 28, 1663, Maryland authorities provided civility and the Susquehanna Indians with 2 barrels of powder, 200 pounds of lead, and a choice of one of 2 small cannons. Wastahando of the Turtle clan declared that it was not the Susquehannos, but the Seneca who initiated the war by killing Susquehanna ambassadors and stealing 70 belts of wampum. He noted that the Susquehanna's enemies mustered about 1,460 warriors, while they had approximately 700 fighting men. Swedish and Dutch authors also referenced the Susquehanna, calling them Minquas, Minquisi, or Macoeratini. These names, given by the Algonquians of the lower Delaware River and Bay, described a group that relentlessly warred against Algonquian tribes from 1608 to 1633. On July 24, 1608, Captain John Smith began exploring the Susquehanna River, completing his work on September 8 of the same year. He called the river's inhabitants Susquehannocks in his text and Susquehannos on his map, marking their town of Susquehannock. Smith's map also identified 5 other towns with kings' houses: Ataoc, Quadroque, Tezenai, Uchewig, and Sepawig. While their exact locations remain uncertain, they can be tentatively placed along the Susquehanna River and its tributaries. Some speculations locate Sepawig near Westminster, Maryland, or Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, Quadroque near Middletown, Tezenai near Lebanon, Ataoc near York, and Uchewig in the Carlisle region. The Susquehanna's history, marked by their strategic importance and formidable reputation, continues to captivate those who study the intricate tapestry of early American frontier life. From the data found in Smith, it is difficult to form a satisfactory estimate of the Susquehanna population at that early date. Smith wrote that the Susquehannocks could muster near 600 able and mighty men, who were entrenched in palisade towns to defend themselves from their mortal enemies, the Massawamecs. These people, whom Smith called Susquehannock, were later referred to as Susquehanna. The Dutch and Swedes on the Delaware River and Bay applied the name Minqua, or Minquas, to them, which the English adopted in its many forms, including Mingo. In February 1633, while cruising near Fort Nassau on the Delaware River, de Vries encountered a detachment of 50 Indians from a larger group of 600. These Minquas, dwelling among the English of Virginia, had come on a warlike expedition. The next day, de Vries met 3 Armawayman Indians who were fugitives from the Minquas. They reported that the Minquas had killed some of their people and returned to their own country. This indicates that the Minqua, or Susquehannock, retained their military strength over 25 years, despite ongoing wars with Algonquian tribes on the Delaware River, Bay, and Potomac. On August 18, 1616, Captain Hendrickson reported his discovery of lands, a bay, and 3 rivers, trading with the Minquis for sables, furs, robes, and skins. This is perhaps the earliest recorded mention of the name Minquois. The famous carte figurative map of 1614 attempted to geographically portray the Susquehanna River and valley, including its tribes. The map shows the Senecas, Gauchos, Capitanesses, and Ayaticas, among others, along the Susquehanna. The Minquas are depicted with 4 palisade towns, possibly near the Conewango River and falls of the Susquehanna. This indicates that the name Minquas originally referred specifically to the people Smith called Susquehannock. In 1652, the Susquehanna ceded their territory to Maryland through Chief Sawahaga, Orotaref, Skahuhady, Rachoga, and Nath-Heldeny. In April 1663, the Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca dispatched an expedition of 800 men against Susquehanna. The town, defended by the river and bastions constructed in accordance with European methods, was found fortified with artillery. This historical tapestry reveals the complexity and resilience of the Susquehanna people, their strategic significance, and their enduring legacy. The Iroquois consequently abandoned the idea of making an assault. In a failed attempt to outwit the Susquehanna with a transparent ruse, 25 of their men were admitted into the fort. These men were immediately seized, placed on scaffolds in sight of their own army, and burned to death. Humiliated, the Iroquois force retreated, shifting to a defensive stance. At that time, the Iroquois tribes faced 3 significant threats: their Susquehanna, Conestoga, enemies, a devastating smallpox outbreak that was decimating their population, and the resulting famine from untended lands and deserted villages. The Susquehanna fort at this time was likely situated above the falls at Conewango, possibly the Canoge mentioned on Herman's 1673 map. In 1615, Champlain sent his interpreter, Brule, to visit one of the allied tribes of the Hurons, who resided along the Susquehanna River, 3 days' journey from the Seneca. From the bare nation of the Hurons, Champlain learned that this allied tribe was highly warlike, with only 3 out of more than 20 towns remaining hostile towards them. The previous year, they had captured 3 Dutchmen who were assisting their enemies, but released them unharmed, mistaking them for French allies. Brule did not report back to Champlain until 1618. From him, Champlain learned that the chief town of the tribe Brule visited, called Carantouan, was defended by 800 warriors, and was only 7 days' journey from where the Dutch traded at latitude 40 degrees. Along the river below, there were many powerful and warlike nations, carrying on wars against each other. On Champlain's 1632 map, this tribe is referred to as Carantouanais. Notably, the number of towns assigned to this tribe by Champlain corresponds to the number assigned to the Massawemecks by Smith. Champlain stated that the tribe had 3 towns, though he named only one after Brule's report. Smith, in his map, placed 3 kings' houses under the legend Massawemecks, indicating these as towns. Regarding the Massawemecks, Smith discovered that, beyond the mountains from whence is the head of the river Patawomeck, the savages report, inhabit their most mortal enemies, the Massawonks, upon a great salt water. This great nation was known to torment the inhabitants of the Patawonks, the Pawtuxunties, the Susquehannocks, and the Tocquaps. While exploring the Chesapeake Bay, Smith encountered 7 canoes filled with these Indians. Observing their targets, baskets, swords, tobacco pipes, platters, bows and arrows, and other items, he concluded that they much exceeded them of our parts. Smith noted their dexterity in managing canoes, made of the barks of trees, sewed together with bark, and well luted with gum, concluding that they resided near some significant body of water. These people were much extolled by the Nanticoke and their neighbors, who admired their prowess and strength. He also learned that they had so many men that they made war with all the world, and that the Massawemecks lived higher up in the mountains. These references to mountains accurately describe the regions along the upper Susquehanna River and its branches. The journal Depicts, Jesuits for 1651 reveals that in the autumn of 1650, 1,500 Iroquois attacked the Neutrals and captured one of their towns. The Neutrals, led by the Tohontinrat or Deer tribe of the Hurons, retaliated, killing or capturing 200 Iroquois. Despite this setback, 1,200 Iroquois returned in the winter of 1651 to avenge their losses. The Neutrals, forming an alliance with Andastoi against the Iroquois, managed to defeat the Seneca. Consequently, the Seneca women had to leave their capital, Sonontuan, and retreat to the Cayuga. Meanwhile, the Mohawk waged an unknown outcome war toward Andastoi. The Jesuit relation for 1651 reports that the Iroquois, having turned their arms against the Neutrals for a year, met with success, capturing 2 frontier towns. The destruction of life was extensive, particularly among the elderly and children, and many young women were taken captive. This decimated the Neutrals, leading to their dispersal, though not their total extinction. After 1700, the Susquehanna Valley became home to many tribes subject to the Iroquois, including the Shawnee, Conoy, Nanticoke, Delawares, Munsee, Mahican, Saponi, Tutello, Tuscarora, and several others settled here under the jurisdiction of the 5 nations. Secretary Logan and Surveyor Eastburn testified that the map was the most correct of any first description of a new country they had ever seen. During the trial, a copy dated 1624 was produced. It was claimed that in the Maryland Charter, the lands granted to Lord Baltimore were so bounded by the help of Captain Smith's said book and map of Virginia, and no other, for that map only, and no other then extant, has all the names agreeable to those mentioned and used in said patent. Hence, Smith's map helped to shape Delaware and played a part in determining the famous Mason and Dixon's line. It was certainly the first effort to map any part of what is now our present state. Penn's Archives, N.S., Volume 7, 315, 322, and 340. Additionally, it is important to mention other publications by Smith and his contemporaries that bear upon the Susquehanna exploration. The True Relation, published in London in 1608, consists of 19 unpaged leaves and provides an account of the colony's first 13 months, starting from April 26, 1607. This work was reprinted with notes by Charles Dean in Boston in 1864. The vessel that took the manuscript to England departed on the same day that Smith embarked on his first voyage up the bay, and thus it contains no information about that discovery. The principal town, Susquehannock, is marked on the map at approximately 22 miles from the bay. However, the narrative mentions that the settlement was located 2 days' journey higher than our barge could pass for the rocks, suggesting it was much further upriver. A 2 days' journey would likely cover more than 22 miles, and since the interpreter's return was awaited for 3 or 4 days, they probably travelled 40 or 50 miles. It is claimed that this chief town was often near the mouth of the Conestoga Creek. Smith held the Susquehannocks in high esteem, ranking them far above the Powhatan tribes, reflecting the broader perception of the Iroquois superiority over the weaker Algonquins. They enveloped Smith in a large bear skin, placed a heavy chain of white beads around his neck, and laid at his feet 18 mantles made from various types of sewn-together skins. They ceremoniously stroked their hands around his neck, signifying his creation as their governor and protector. They pledged their loyalty, food, and all they possessed if he would stay and defend them against their mortal enemies, the Massawomakes. Their confident trust in the white newcomers was a stark contrast to the often sly and suspicious nature of the Algonquin tribes. This was vividly illustrated during Smith's reception on the Potomac, where he was met with shouting, yelling, and cries resembling spirits from hell. After their discussion, 5 Susquehannock chiefs boldly boarded Smith's barge and crossed the bay to the Tocquocs with the pale faces, leaving their men and canoes behind due to the high winds. Much like the Mohawks, they moved freely among the coastal tribes whenever they desired. Captain Smith's description of these impressive warriors is captivating and essential to this narrative. He noted, "Such great and well-proportioned men are seldom seen. They appeared as giants to the English and even to their neighbours. Despite their imposing stature, they had an honest and simple demeanour, though we had to restrain them from adoring us as gods. These people are unique in both their language and attire. Their voices, resonating like echoes in a vault, matched their formidable figures. They wore bear and wolf skins. Some had cloaks made from bear heads and skins, with the wearer's head fitting into the bear's neck, the ears attached to their shoulders, and the bear's nose and teeth hanging down their chest. Others wore bearskin mantles with the paws and faces creating a dramatic effect. One man wore a wolf's head as a necklace, and his long tobacco pipe was intricately carved, with a bird or deer at the end, substantial enough to crush a skull. They carried bows, arrows, and clubs befitting their grandeur. While crossing the bay to Tockwok with the 5 chiefs aboard, Smith sketched a vivid portrait of one of them. He noted, "The image of the most impressive among them is illustrated on the map." His calf measured 3/4 of a yard around, and the rest of his body matched this grand proportion, making him the most magnificent man we had ever seen. His hair was long on one side and shaved close on the other, with a ridge running over his crown like a cock's comb. His arrows were 5/4 long, tipped with splinters of white, crystal-like stone, shaped like a heart, about 1 inch broad and 1.5 inches or more in length. He carried these arrows in a wolf-skin quiver on his back, with his bow in one hand and his club in the other, as described. Check out the map for his picture. The hairstyle he described and depicted might remind one of a Huronian fashion, featuring a combination of crown shaving and long hair at the nape of the neck. Smith concluded this first fascinating encounter with these trusting giants with a poignant note that they left Tockwok sorrowing over their departure, yet with a promise to visit again the following year. Captain Smith faced significant criticism for his description of the Susquehannock's size, leading some to discredit his entire body of work. Although his later writings exhibit a touch of ego and marvel, his general accuracy and truthfulness have been fairly well defended. See William Wirt Henry's address in Richmond, Virginia, 1882. Smith remarked, "Such great and well-proportioned men are seldom seen, as they seemed like giants to the English and even to their neighbours." Speaking of the one he sketched, he said, "He seemed the finest man we ever saw. There is nothing improbable in this. He did not claim they were the sons of Anak, who come from the giants, making the white men appear as grasshoppers. The only thing that may seem exaggerated is Smith's statement that the calf of this man's leg, whom he depicted, was 3/4 of a yard around, and the rest of his limbs matched this proportion. This might be a bit of an overstatement, but there are examples even among us today of large individuals for whom this could be true. In fact, some critics have themselves exaggerated, speaking almost as if Smith's giants were equivalent to mythical giants who wielded pine trees as staffs. Alsop, who published a history of Maryland in 1666, knew and visited these natives and provided corroborating testimony. He described them as a people cast in the mould of a most large and warlike demeanour, the men being mostly around 7 feet tall, with their bulk fitting such a height. Their voices were deep and resonant, like echoes from a cave, and their gait and behaviour were straight, stately, and majestic. They tread the earth with pride, contempt, and disdain for the mundane, as one might expect from beings of such grand stature. Regarding the numerical strength of these indigenous people, it was reported that they can muster nearly 600 able men. This estimate likely applies only to the town of Susquehannock, from which Smith's delegation originated. If the other towns were similarly populated, there could have been around 3,600 men. Even if only half as numerous, there would still be 2,100 men, a number comparable to the 5 nations. There is no valid reason or proof to suggest that the natives in Pennsylvania, from the dividing waters of the Delaware and Susquehanna rivers westward, were not originally this numerous. Plenty of evidence on the ground indicates that the regions of the Susquehanna and its branches were once densely populated with tribes that history has almost forgotten. In recent years, it has become fashionable to downplay the original number of natives in the eastern part of the United States. While many early accounts were exaggerated due to unobservant men, ignorance, a love of the marvelous, or some ulterior motive, some contemporary articles, like those by Mr. G. Mallory, go too far in the opposite direction by claiming that the indigenous population in the United States today is as numerous as it was at the time of the first settlements. The number of natives destroyed by smallpox, other diseases, deadly firearms, and the equally fatal firewater is simply incalculable. Their current, diminished remnants are no measure of their original numbers, condition, and power during their days of glory. Additionally, it is not true that we can find surviving remnants of all the old tribes, as many have entirely vanished, along with their languages, while other mixed-blood remnants have been maintained mainly to secure government annuities. So, there you have it, a concise and compelling summary of the Susquehannocks and their interactions with other tribes and European settlers, fit for a history book.